the baker, who puts the bread into the oven. This is more witty, but less grand, something like Racine after Corneille, like Euripides after Aeschylus. Certain slang phrases which participate in the two epochs and have at once the barbaric character and the metaphorical character resemble phantasmagories. Les chausseurs vont solliciter des gars à la lune. The prowlers are going to steal horses by night. This passes before the mind like a group of spectres. One knows not what one sees. In the third place, the expedient. Slang lives on the language. It uses it in accordance with its fancy. It dips into it haphazard, and it often confines itself, when occasion arises, to alter it in a gross and summary fashion. Occasionally, with the ordinary words thus deformed and complicated with words of pure slang, picturesque phrases are formed, in which there can be felt the mixture of the two preceding elements, the direct creation and the metaphor. Le cab jaspine, je marron que la roulotte de panton crime dans le sabri. The dog is barking. I suspect that the diligence for Paris is passing through the woods. Le daube est cendre. Le dabouge est le mérossière. Le fait est botif. The bourgeois is stupid. The bourgeoisie is cunning. The daughter is pretty. Generally, to throw listeners off the track, slang confines itself to adding to all the words of the language without distinction an ignoble tail, a termination in aire, org, yerg, or in ush. Thus, vos yerg travaille bon org sisi gumouche. Do you think that leg of mutton good? A phrase addressed by Cartouche to a turnkey in order to find out whether the sum offered for his escape suited him. The termination in mar has been added recently. Slang, being the dialect of corruption, quickly becomes corrupted itself. Besides this, as it is always seeking concealment, as soon as it feels that it is understood, it changes its form. Contrary to what happens with every other vegetation, every ray of light which falls upon it kills whatever it touches. Thus slang is in constant process of decomposition and recomposition, an obscure and rapid work which never pauses. It passes over more ground in 10 years than a language in 10 centuries. Thus, le laton, bread, becomes le latif. Le gaille, horse, becomes le gaie. La fertonche, straw, becomes la fertille. Le momignard, brat, le momarque. Le fique, duds, frusque. Le chic, the church, le grougeois. Le calabre, neck, le collat. The devil is at first Gehisto, then le rabouin, then the baker. The priest is a ratichon, then the boar, le sanglier. The dagger is le 22, 22, then le serin, then le langre. The police are raille, then roussin, then rousset, then marchands de lacets, dealers in stay laces, then coqueur, then cogne. The executioner is le tôle, then charlot, l'atigeur, then le béquillard. In the 17th century, to fight was to give each other snuff. In the 19th, it is to chew each other's throats. There have been 20 different phrases between these two extremes. Cartouche's talk would have been Hebrew to Lacenaire. All the words of this language are perpetually engaged in flight, like the men who utter them. Still, from time to time, and in consequence of this very movement, the ancient slang crops up again and becomes new once more. It has its headquarters where it maintains its sway. The Temple preserved the slang of the 17th century. Bicêtre, when it was a prison, preserved the slang of Thunes. There one could hear the termination in anche of the old Thuneurs. Bois-tu? Bois-tu? Do you drink? But perpetual movement remains its law, nevertheless. If the philosopher succeeds in fixing, for a moment, for purposes of observation, this language which is incessantly evaporating, he falls into doleful and useful meditation. No study is more efficacious and more fecund in instruction. There is not a metaphor, not an analogy in slang which does not contain a lesson. Among these men, to beat means to feign. One beats a melody. Ruse is their strength. For them, the idea of the man is not separated from the idea of darkness. The night is called la sorgue, man l'orgue. Man is a derivative of the night. They have taken up the practice of considering society in the light of an atmosphere which kills them, of a fatal force, and they speak of their liberty as one would speak of his health. A man under arrest is a sick man. A man who is condemned is a dead man. The most terrible thing for the prisoner within the four walls in which he is buried is a sort of glacial chastity, and he calls the dungeon the castus. In that funereal place, life outside always presents itself under its most smiling aspect. The prisoner has irons on his feet. You think, perhaps, that his thought is that it is with the feet that one walks. No, he is thinking that it is with the feet that one dances. So, when he has succeeded in severing his fetters, his first idea is that now he can dance. And he calls the saw the bastringue, public house ball. A name is a centre, profound assimilation. The ruffian has two heads, one of which reasons out his actions and leads him all his life long, and the other which he has upon his shoulders on the day of his death. He calls the head which counsels him in crime la sorbonne, and the head which expiates it la tronche. When a man has no longer anything but rags upon his body and vices in his heart, when he has arrived at that double moral and material degradation which the word blackguard characterizes in its two acceptations, he is ripe for crime. He is like a well-whetted knife. He has two cutting edges, his distress and his malice. So slang does not say a blackguard, it says un réguise. What are the galleys? A brazier of damnation, a hell. The convict calls himself a fagot. And finally, what the name do malefactors give to their prison? The college. A whole penitentiary system can be evolved from that word. Does the reader wish to know where the majority of the songs of the galleys, those refrains called in the special vocabulary lire en fa, have had their birth? Let him listen to what follows. There existed at the Châtelet in Paris a large and long cellar. This cellar was 8 feet below the level of the Seine. It had neither windows nor air holes. Its only aperture was the door. Men could enter there, air could not. This vault had for ceiling a vault of stone, and for floor 10 inches of mud. It was flagged, but the pavement had rotted and cracked under the oozing of the water. 8 feet above the floor, a long and massive beam traversed this subterranean excavation from side to side. From this beam hung, at short distances apart, chains 3 feet long, and at the end of these chains there were rings for the neck. In this vault, men who had been condemned to the galleys were incarcerated until the day of their departure for Toulon. They were thrust under this beam, where each one found his fetters swinging in the darkness and waiting for him. The chains, those pendant arms, and the necklets, those open hands, caught the unhappy wretches by the throat. They were riveted and left there. As the chain was too short, they could not lie down. They remained motionless in that cavern, in that night, beneath that beam, almost hanging, forced to unheard of efforts to reach their bread, jug, or their vault overhead, mud even to mid-leg, filth flowing to their very calves, broken asunder with fatigue, with thighs and knees giving way, clinging fast to the chain with their hands in order to obtain some rest, unable to sleep except when standing erect, and awakened every moment by the strangling of the collar. Some woke no more. In order to eat, they pushed the bread, which was flung to them in the mud, along their leg with their heel until it reached their hand. How long did they remain thus? 1 month? 2 months? 6 months sometimes. One stayed a year. It was the ante-chamber of the galleys. Men were put there for stealing a hair from the king. In this sepulchre hell, what did they do? What man can do in a sepulchre? They went through the agonies of death.